it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, your HHS secretary. At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. BARDA drives some of our most advanced scientific research. After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses more risks and benefits for these respiratory viruses. That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate. Let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines for every American who wants them. That's why we're moving beyond the limitations of mRNA for respiratory viruses and investing in better solutions. Hi, it's Robert F.
Imagine landing in a city where the real threat isn't in the crowded markets or busy airports, but in something so small you can barely see it. In southern China right now, doctors are rushing patients under mosquito nets, a sight that hasn't been this common since the earliest days of COVID. The US CDC has quietly raised its alert level, warning travelers to think twice before heading in. And the illness behind all of this? It spreads faster than you'd expect, hides behind symptoms that mimic other fevers, and has left thousands of people suddenly unable to even walk across the room. In Guangdong province, the numbers keep climbing. What started as scattered reports of fever and joint pain has exploded into more than 7,000 confirmed cases, with cities like Foshan turning into epicenters almost overnight. Hospitals there aren't just crowded. They're preparing in ways that feel eerily familiar. Patients are being tucked under protective nets as if the walls themselves can't keep the danger out. Local health workers describe entire wards where the hum of mosquitoes feels louder than the conversations. And for people living in these neighborhoods, daily life has shifted into a quiet kind of paranoia. A single bite could mean days of fever, weeks of pain, and for some, a recovery that never really feels complete. When the U.S. Centers for Disease Control raises its voice, the world tends to listen. And in late July, that voice carried a warning. China is now under a level 2 travel alert. On the surface, that might sound technical, but here's what it really means. Travelers are being told to change their behavior. Stay covered. Stay cautious. Stay alert. It's the kind of warning usually reserved for outbreaks that have proven hard to contain, and Chikungunya has already checked that box. Unlike the quiet, invisible creep of a virus, this one arrives on wings. Daytime mosquitoes. Carry it from person to person, neighborhood to neighborhood, and each bite is a roll of the dice. For anyone planning to step off a plane in Guangzhou or Foshan, it's not just about where you go. It's about what might follow you home. Unlike diseases that hide in the air or on crowded surfaces, Chikungunya's carrier doesn't need a biad cough or a handshake. It only needs a sip of your blood. The Aedes mosquito, the same one blamed for dengue and Zika, is a master of timing. It strikes during the day when most people feel safe, and it breeds in the most ordinary corners. Water collected in a flower pot, a puddle by the road, even a forgotten bottle cap left in the yard. Entire outbreaks have been traced back to something as small as standing rainwater in a ditch. That's what makes this illness so unnerving. You can close your doors, you can wear a mask, but against a mosquito that waits silently by the window, what protection feels enough? The first sign usually comes quiet, a heat rising through the body, the kind that feels like any other fever. But within hours, chikungunya makes itself known. The joints begin to ache, not just a dull soreness, but sharp, grinding pain that can leave even the healthiest person struggling to stand. Rashes bloom across the skin, muscles tighten, headaches pulse behind the eyes. For some, the nausea sets in before they can even name what's happening. What makes it even more unsettling is how easily it hides in plain sight. Dengue, Zika, Chikungunya, they all blur together. And while doctors search for answers, patients are left trapped in bodies that feel older than their years, worn down by a sickness delivered in a single bite. For most people, chikungunya is a brutal storm that eventually passes. But not everyone walks away the same. Newborns, still fragile in their first days of life, can be hit with complications their tiny bodies aren't built to fight. Older adults, already carrying the weight of age, find themselves battling fevers that drag on, with joint pain that refuses to let go. And for anyone living with heart disease, diabetes, or a weakened immune system, the danger doesn't just lie in the fever itself, but in what it can awaken. Doctors in Guangdong whisper of cases where the illness doesn't stop at the joints. It creeps into the eyes, the heart, even the nervous system, leaving behind damage that lingers long after the mosquito is gone. In a city already buzzing with fear, these stories spread almost as quickly as the virus itself. For most patients, recovery feels like a finish line. The fever fades, the rash disappears, and life begins to look normal again. But chikungunya doesn't always let go. In some cases, the pain clings stubbornly, settling into the joints like an unwelcome guest. Weeks turn into months, and what should have been a short illness becomes a daily struggle just to climb stairs or hold a pen. Rarer still, the complications strike deeper. There are stories of eyesight clouding, of sudden heart trouble, even of the nervous system faltering without warning. These aren't the headlines that make it into travel advisories, but in the villages and cities of Guangdong, they're whispered about in waiting rooms and hospital corridors. Because once you've seen someone walk in strong and leave limping, the idea of a mosquito bite feels far more sinister. In Guangdong, the fight isn't being waged with vaccines or miracle drugs. It's happening in doorways, in kitchens, and on balconies. People are arming themselves with sprays, nets, and long sleeves, as if dressing for war. Buckets of stagnant water are emptied like ticking time bombs, every puddle seen as a potential breeding ground. Families seal their windows tight, adding mesh screens and hoping it's enough to hold back wings that slip through the smallest gaps. Travelers are urged to coat their skin in repellent strong enough to keep mosquitoes at bay, the kind that smells sharp but feels like armor. It's a strangely personal battle, one household at a time, one bite avoided, one restless night under the safety of a net. Because in a place where even hospitals are stringing mosquito nets over every bed, the war against chikungunya feels less like prevention and more like survival. Illness doesn't need a passport. A single traveler can carry it across oceans, tucked quietly in their bloodstream, showing no signs until the fever hits days later. That's why the CDC raised its alert. Not because chikungunya is new, but because it moves with us. Airports, tourist hubs, crowded trains, they become silent highways for something born in a roadside puddle thousands of miles away. And with the same mosquitoes living in cities from Miami to Mumbai, the line between their outbreak and our outbreak blurs quickly. Health officials warn that if the wrong mosquito bites the wrong traveler at the wrong time, the story unfolding in Guangdong could just as easily take root somewhere else. It's a reminder that in a world this connected, no outbreak ever really stays local. In the end, chikungunya isn't carried on the wind or spread through a crowded room. It doesn't roar in with headlines or shut down cities overnight. It arrives quietly, on wings too small to see, and leaves behind a trail of pain that can last far longer than the fever itself. Right now, it's spreading in southern China. Tomorrow, it could be somewhere else entirely. That's the unsettling truth about outbreaks in our age. The borders we draw on maps mean little to creatures that never needed them in the first place. One bite, one traveler, one moment where protection slips, and the echo begins again.